Successfully deploying applications on the SAP Business Technology Platform. Sorry, I don't know what's happening here. Not yet. I don't want to end this stream. So let me start again. Successfully deploying your applications on the SAP Business Technology Platform is just the beginning. True value emerges when you can efficiently operate, maintain, and scale them. In this series, we will explore critical aspects of day two operations. Whether you are an administrator, developer, or security expert, this series will equip you with the knowledge and tools to master day two operations so that you can focus on innovations instead of firefighting. A very warm welcome and thank you for joining our session, Optimizing Day Two Operations for your SAP BTP apps. An overview session for experts and beginners. I'm happy to have here with me Boris Taske. As a seasoned product manager, Boris spearheads the DevOps narrative for SAP customers, leveraging SAP BTP, while also overseeing pertinent lifecycle management initiatives. His primary aim is to empower SAP customers to embrace a more agile approach in developing and operating their applications on SAP BTP, all the while maintaining optimal levels of control. Renowned for his expertise, Boris frequently takes the stage at both external and internal hosted events, sharing insights and best practices with audiences worldwide. And with this, without further ado, over to you, Boris.
Thanks a lot, Tanya, for the very nice introduction and especially for hosting this whole series. Really appreciate it. And of course, thanks a lot to all of you and welcome to really the first episode of our new webcast series. Really looking forward to welcome you throughout the upcoming weeks and months, actually. Let me share my screen and I can get it started. So, what is it all about? I mean, Tanya already outlined the overall concept here, right? The intention of today's session is really to give the beginners an idea of the context. So what is it all about? Where does it relate to? And how does the overall life cycle look like? And to get everyone on the same page. And for everyone, both beginners and experts, I will try to provide really an overview of the whole series so that you can plan your upcoming weeks accordingly and know exactly maybe whom to involve to certain sessions and maybe to bring in further experts into our whole discussion and where you can just take the opportunity to discuss the corresponding topics then with the experts from SAP. But I want to start with a short introduction on the whole topic, because some of you might wonder, okay, what does this day two mean at all, right? I mean, those of you not familiar with the concept might wonder what it's all about. So let me briefly introduce it to you. For that, let's briefly switch back to day zero, because in the end, it's just a way to describe typical IT life cycles with that concept. And we start here at day zero, because in informatics, computer science, you normally start with zeros, but here it also makes sense because you really start where you don't have anything to operate. There's nothing yet there, right? Meaning on day zero, you want to really think and plan what you are up to do. Meaning you design your architecture, your infrastructure. You might also maybe select your tool chain, including continuous integration delivery pipeline, for example, ideally highly integrated, and consider security requirements. So we have planning, design, evaluation, if you're unsure which direction to take, maybe also purchasing, right? So it's really laying the ground actually for implementing the corresponding solution. On day two then, not surprisingly, it's about realizing then the solution, meaning you deploy or instantiate your cloud infrastructure, implement your custom applications, configure them, all you need to do to get the solution really running. So it's around implementation, deployment, configuration, integration, testing, and implementation really means not only implementing the infrastructure, but also the solution, meaning performing development and so on. So at the end of day one, you have a running solution, somehow running, ideally, right? And now day two is all about, yeah, to really optimize it, right? You make sure that it's running as expected. This is with the right availability, performance, all the features that are needed by the end users, considering security and compliance, eliminating manual efforts so that you can reduce also the cognitive load of your teams as an administrator, right? Also of your development teams, so that they are able to really focus on generating business value, meaning reducing overhead. So you look into observability so that you get transparency how your application is behaving, troubleshooting or root cause analysis and troubleshooting. So if issues should come up. Of course, I already mentioned security and compliance. That's, of course, also key for cloud applications. And again, optimizing, meaning reducing manual efforts. That's the whole idea. And here on in this webcast series, we want to really focus on those tasks around day two. But today, in today's session, I will nevertheless also touch upon some day zero, day one topics, just to give you the context. It does mean that we will have then deep dives on those day one and day zero topics, but just to get everyone on the same page again. Yeah, so with that, let's jump directly into what we have planned for you in the upcoming weeks with an overview of the whole webcast series. As we have heard, I mean, it's about mastering day two operations in SAP BTP, and we want to provide guidance for architects, developers, and mainly, of course, administrators. And yeah, we try to group those topics into some high-level categories. To be honest, they are not razor sharp, so there might be some overlaps, but just to give you some idea, I mean, it's about, for example, here, security and compliance, we already mentioned. It's about managing the life cycle of your application. And it's about administration and operations, for example, also of the platform itself, meaning of SAP Business Technology Platform. That's what it's all about. And in terms of topics for the different tools, let's take a brief look. So for administration and operations, we want to focus mainly on optimization potential. So we will look into Terraform as an industry standard for infrastructure as code, and will offer several sessions around SAP Automation Pilot, which you can use to reduce manual operations efforts and again reduce cognitive load for the teams. Another rather platform topic is high availability and disaster recovery, because as soon as you start to run mission critical applications on SAP BTP, that will come up as a topic for sure. So we want to reflect it also here as part of our series. In terms of security and compliance, yeah, we will look into relevant topics that you have to be aware of as administrator, like yeah, best practices around identity and access management, because that's of course key. And yeah, also provide security recommendations along different aspects, because for BTP, yeah, we want to ensure top-tier security, of course, for our platform, but also for all applications built and running on it, be it around compliance with built-in authentication, single sign-on, and yeah, overall strong authorization concepts. And yeah, an example for compliance are, for example, simplified audit logging for your custom applications. Yeah, just allowing you to focus again on development while ensuring data security and compliance overall for whatever you build on our platform. Then we have around management of the application lifecycle. So we have, for example, integrated DevOps tools. Tanya already mentioned that I'm in charge of the DevOps story on BTP, so not surprisingly, I bring in this aspect, but it's just one aspect. As well as openness to leverage existing tools and pipelines. That's key from our point of view. And yeah, we want to streamline the application lifecycle management so that you can, again, accelerate development, deployment, and operations. Here, one of the key factors is really SAP Cloud ALM in its role as SAP BTP operations platform. So we will provide sessions around the overview, focus on operations, of course, but also we will touch upon some aspects around implementation, like for RISE customers. Then we will look into observability. Here we have a local observability tool with SAP Cloud Logging. And of course, we also want to foster on central ops automation. They can bring in then views from hybrid scenarios and then trigger automation flows as well. Yeah, that's actually what we have in preparation for you. You see, we have a huge number of different sessions in the upcoming weeks. And yeah, we just want to provide transparency here so that you can plan accordingly and sign up for the other sessions or spread the word for your colleagues to join. On the upcoming slides, I will provide you a little bit more insights, again, for some of the topics, day 0, day 1, and focus, of course, on day 2. For those topics that we then will deep dive in as part of the course, I have those links then down there, meaning where you get, again, the topic in more detail and then can just plan accordingly. But let's start with the SAP BTP Guidance Framework, because I think that's a very good starting point for those who should be new to the topic. We had also a short episode recently around the topic, but I just want to recap what it's all about. So the SAP BTP Guidance Framework provides a central entry point for a target group specific guidance, for example, to architect, implement, and operate solutions on business technology platform. So you can benefit from decision guides, reference architectures, methodologies, and best practices. And you see here the target group specific approach here by those different target groups, meaning we have guidance for architects. Again, the most prominent ones are the reference architectures for typical SAP solutions you can use as blueprint to plan according landscapes. But we have also here other methodologies. For developers, we have mainly the development, the SAP BTP Developers Guide, and overall our DevOps approach. And today, of course, focus will be on guidance for administrators, where we have administrator guide, again, the DevOps approach, then of course, we focus on the operations part or what you can do as administrator to enable your teams to benefit from a more agile approach, nevertheless with the right level of control. And for example, security recommendations that you can benefit from as well. So let's deep dive first into the first overall block with administrating and operating the platform in its widest sense, right? I want to start with this administrator guide because again, I think it's a pretty good first read for those of you new to the topic. Those of you who might know the best practices for SAP BTP guide, actually it was evolved from that one. The best practice guide was a more generic guide, and now we said, okay, it does make sense to have really more target group specific recommendations. So we extracted the operations part into this administrator's guide and moved other parts into other documentation to have a more focus and be able to really address the right aspects then for you as administrators, for example. It does provide generic BTP information like basic platform concepts, information about the shared responsibility model, also checklists. Also, it does contain planning information, which would be day 0, right? But nevertheless, you should also be aware of that whatever you plan and then implement on day 0 and day 1 will have implications on how you can operate later on day 2. So it does make sense that you're involved and are aware of what is happening there around the governance model, especially around the account model, because that will, of course, play an important role later on administrating then the solutions and security and compliance. And finally, we cover also lifecycle management aspects like delivery, which would be day 1, and operations then day 2. So pretty good first read. And especially as we try to extract the most important aspects into the guides. So it's not just a collection of all the deep dive documentation, then you end up with a guide that is several hundred pages long or something like that. No, it's trying to be crisp, let's call it that way, so that you get an understanding. And if you like to deep dive, you can then still link to the standard documentation for more information. I already mentioned that account structuring is, of course, an important aspect also for day two operations later on. So what you do for planning on day one, day zero and day one, in implementing it will help you later on. And here you see an example structure where we have on top level, of course, the global accounts as representation of your account. Sorry, not of your account, of your contract, apologies. And on the lowest level, we have the different sub-accounts here in a staged setup where we have dev, test, prod for different projects. Here we have, for example, finance, sales. We have also some shared services. And in the middle, we can have several levels of directories which you can come up with. And the good thing is that that already helps you to structure things. You can also assign labels like who's owning an account or to which cost center shall the costs imposed by that account be charged to. And that will, of course, help you right from the start to have more transparency and handle those aspects later on as well. When you think of now this structure, I mean, that's one of the best practices. And you see we have here the shared accounts with, for example, SAP HANA that you might want to run centrally to reduce costs, and maybe some other central assets run there as well. I think it gets clear that it does make sense to think about those aspects right from the beginning to start really with a good setup. And also, I hope it's getting clear that you should somehow ensure that whatever concept you come up, that you can somehow enforce that. And it could, of course, be done either by strict governance, always a lot of efforts, or you do it that teams that want to onboard to BTP get an account structure configured by a central team. But that's, of course, always a large effort for that central team, especially if you think of scalability. So it does make things to think already here about automation, right? So that you have a standardization and then can provide self-services, for example. That, of course, makes it much easier for empowered teams. And here we bring into play already Terraform, right? Terraform is an de facto industry standard, I would say, for infrastructure as code, where you automate the management and provisioning of IT infrastructure through machine-readable configuration, like describing what you want to have, and that is then implemented accordingly. And with that, you can really ensure consistency because every sub-account structure that is being set up will look the same per definition, right? You can also scale because by the self-services, you can really then serve a lot of different teams that want to onboard. And you also get some advantages like version control, for example. And you see, we have here a provider for Terraform for SAP Business Technology Platform, which allows you then to automate, for example, managing global accounts, directories, sub-accounts, such as set entitlements and subscriptions of the services you want to use from BTP, managed environments, managed service instances, bindings, trusts, user and roles, and so on. And as we think that's really crucial to really improve the overall setup, we are offering 2 sessions here. Both will happen in March. And the first one is around the Terraform provider. So it's really an introduction session where we again motivate infrastructure as a code and also outline Terraform as provider for BTP in more detail. And the colleagues will walk you through a multi-staged setup for dev, test, prod, including modularization and usage of dependent Terraform providers. And there you really get an understanding of the different options you have as a customer to implement that and what to consider. Very good to jumpstart. And one obstacle in the Terraform journey is nevertheless how to get existing infrastructure under the management of Terraform. So it's good if you start greenfield, but if you have already something in place, that's always a little bit challenging. And Terraform does offer import functionality, but based on our experience, that's pretty cumbersome and also error prone. That's why the colleagues from SAP came up with a command line interface that allows you then to handle that and just lowers this entry barrier for brownfield scenarios. So if you're interested in that, then the second session is, of course, interesting for you. What is also interesting, of course, is to get that transparency in course of FinOps or cost management. Here, the SAP BTP cockpit does provide certain insights, like, how are services used per service. You can see cloud credits that are consumed and so on. So you get certain transparency. But of course, for you, it will be crucial to be able to perform some internal cross-charging, meaning you have different teams and you want to assign the overall costs generated for BTP to the different consumers, so to say. And for those sub-accounts, it's pretty straightforward. You could just split the costs by, for example, directories, where you have one directory per department, and whatever is used underneath that is then charged to that department. Or you could have sub-accounts, or you use labels, right? Again, like you say, okay, this resource is used by that cost center, so I have a label, and later on I filter for all the costs for this cost center, and then I have the corresponding internal bill. For shared services, meaning think again of the SAP HANA Cloud that might be running shared and then used by different applications, maybe also by different departments. That's a little bit more tricky. So you could think about if you want to apply fixed rates, like per user or per app, if you want to keep it simple, or you come up with a custom metering where you can use API management and analytics and resource monitoring to then really break it down in more detail. Of course, it heavily depends on how much costs are generated. Is it worth the effort? Do you really need to have that full transparency, or can you rather give a rule of thumbs? That's really depending on the actual service. If you intend to run business critical apps, like mentioned before on BTP, high availability and disaster recovery will become relevant for sure, right? So it's also important that you get aware of what is possible there. So high availability means that a service ability to remain operational and accessible for user with minimal downtime and interruption, meaning it's available all the time, right? I mean, no matter if there are issues or whatever, it's crucial that you do not lose any end users trying to access the service and then maybe going elsewhere, right? That's something you want to avoid. So you really want to prevent the loss of service in the first place. Disaster recovery, on the other side, is rather referring to the processes put in place to restore and recover to an operational state following a disaster. Think of an earthquake that might, God forbid, but you never know, might harm a data center or a landline connection or whatever. And then you just want to have resources running in other locations that can just immediately jump in and recover your service there. So you want to protect applications and your services from unwanted data loss. That's the main reason here. And to keep it short, high availability intended to handle problems with a system running, and disaster recovery intended to handle problems after a system fails. And now you can think as technology platform for the SAP ecosystem, and intended for application development and handling integrations between different systems. Of course, SAP BTP plays a central and also important role in your company, right? And even if you do not run critical scenarios today, it can already be a crucial part in an end-to-end scenario. And that makes it important that the platform is reliable and that appropriate mechanisms can be applied also for your custom applications to really make sure that you have high availability and can recover from a disaster reliably. And here, for example, we see one of the offerings that SAP Business Technology brings. Here we have the option to set up applications in different availability zones. That's this AZ meant. And you see we have some active instances, meaning they are acting on on par, meaning on the same level, meaning they can serve in parallel requests. And there for the database, we see that we have a replication for an active passive setup where we rather say, okay, if the first one fails, we make sure that, the relevant data is replicated and is not lost in that sense. And there are different aspects around it. And that's why, we offer also a session here. That's a session around HRDR, where you can learn which mechanisms are already in place from the business technology platform. Then you learn also around the service level agreements we do apply for the different offerings. And we will also take a look at our roadmap so that you also understand in which direction we are heading and what to expect very soon. Then we come to administration operational in the sense of reducing manual operations efforts. And here we have the SAP Automation Pilot Service. We had Terraform, which is good for infrastructure as code, meaning automating the provisioning of accounts and so on. But there are also other manual tasks around operating your applications, be it for alert remediation or performing regular checks or other things. And here, Automation Pilot brings catalogs of several hundred commands. Think of it small actions you perform, and then you can compile it into own custom commands that you can then use to perform depending on the actual use case. So, for example, you could, starting down there, have an alert that triggers an action, or you have something that is performed regularly, like a security check for your SAP HANA Cloud instance, where you perform certain checks and then generate a report that's maybe to be executed once a week. You can also, of course, trigger those commands ad hoc. Whenever you get a request, instead of manually performing it, you execute the command. Or we have also a close integration into SAP Cloud ALM. I will come to that later, but the idea, of course, is clear. There you get some central observability, and that might also trigger then, for example, an automated reaction in case of issues. And the Automation Pilot Service can then execute those actions on different runtimes and resources of the business technology platform. Sure, I mean, SAP HANA Cloud or the different environments like Cloud Foundry, Kyma, you name it. It can also, of course, work with third-party tools like Dynatrace or Jenkins if you want to come up with corresponding actions, and can call whatever API is in place, right? Like if you have Jira in use or ServiceNow, it could also generate tickets. And again, the key differentiator really is this catalog of automated commands with a clear focus on SAP Business Technology Platform. And as we see a lot of potential in that area, we have even 3 sessions. So April is our technical ops automation month, so to say, if you want. We will start here on beginning of April with an overview session of the SAP Automation Pilot Service. Really, if you're new to the service, you can really learn about how it works, what it does bring, and get some insights on how to generate those commands. How you can streamline your normal operations tasks. The next session then will focus especially on SAP HANA Cloud. So there we have a lot of use cases that we see that have potential for optimization. And that's why we said, okay, let's explore in the session how you can simplify and accelerate SAP HANA Cloud processes, like around remediation or, for example, handling updates and so on. So you can discover how to automate corrective and troubleshooting actions for one or more SAP HANA Cloud instances. And with that, just make sure to increase or accelerate the time to have incident resolutions. And finally, we have a session where we put in ideas for a lot of other use cases that we have gathered. I mean, SAP Automation Pilot Service is heavily used inside of SAP, so we have a lot of internal stakeholders that use it, and we just want to share some inspiration that we have gathered from internal usage and other customers you can benefit from. Meaning it's really an inspiring session where we look at around, for example, automating API checks, Cloud Foundry, app remediation, seamless integration with ticketing management system like Jira, like mentioned before, and so on. So you can get a lot of inspiration with that. I want to give you a short demo here. I mean, we have those sessions upcoming because, yeah, but as we have those several sessions, I think it's fair to give you a first glimpse on it so they get a feeling about if that is really something for you. Here we see the automation pilot service. I will just briefly go through the provided catalogs. I hope I did not time out here. I did time out. Not surprisingly, I did talk too much. No, just kidding. Here we see the provided catalogs, and you see they're gathered in different catalogs, categories like alerting, handling Cloud Foundry, connectivity handling, database handling, Dynatrace, emailing, HTTP, GitHub, Jenkins, Jira, scripting, monitoring, SQL operations, utility operations, authorization, trust management, and we are constantly working to extend that, right, based on the use cases on a business technology platform. And yeah, let's just go into one of those. I don't know, maybe in this Cloud Foundry one, just to give you an idea that you see that those are rather atomic instances, like here creating a space or getting some other information, same as for the other ones. And the idea would now be that you collect or take those single elements and put it into longer chains of longer commands that you can then execute automatically. You can also store the required inputs and then define what to do with the output, right? And of course, that's a very steep learning curve to learn about those commands. So that's why you have also added a Gen AI assistant where you just say, okay, I have here my catalog, I give it a name, and now I describe via a prompt what I want to have automated. Here I have here an example where I say, okay, I want a command that sends an HTTP request to a specific URL to verify the health status of an application. If the status is down, please restart a Cloud Foundry application, then check how is the SAP HANA Cloud CPU utilization. If it's beyond the threshold, you can also restart it because that's anyhow a demo account. No worries about that. Finally, yeah, you retrieve error logs, and of course you can add whatever you want, right? Create a Jira ticket with the outcome, and then I let Gen AI do it. And the good thing is that it's not a black box what comes out here. So here's an example of exactly the command I had before. You will recognize hopefully what we have done here. Then it's coming up. And here you see exactly what it does. First, it does perform the self-check. And you see for this, you see it did look into the catalogs of commands, and it found here an HTTP request, not surprisingly. For restarting the apps, it also found a command in the catalogs, and that's exactly the help we see, right? You do not have to learn the catalogs any longer, but you come up with an idea, type it in, and you get a feeling about how that can be mapped to corresponding commands. And here we have also benefited from best practice from our internal teams. For example, here using SQL statements for SAP HANA handling based on the best practice from the SAP HANA Cloud colleagues. You can also here, of course, edit what is ever here. You see here I've run the example with 75%, but I could also now change it. You can also use existing commands and later on say, yeah, I want to extend those. And for that, sorry, it's very unresponsive. It's an internal testing system. Apologies for that. You can just say, okay, I generate here another command. Where shall it be in my whole flow, in my existing flow, right before the end? And again, I describe what I want to have, right? Or I use some of the examples provided, like create a Jira bug with summary test plata and description, blah, 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 and assign it to that user or to that distribution list, and you're fine. So you get the idea. So it's pretty simple to get a feeling to try it out. And the good thing is the Gen AI assistant is included in the service without additional charges there. Okay, coming to the next block, and that's security. And here I want to stress, first of all, the security recommendations. First of all, that's documentation, but it's nevertheless, it's from my point of view, very, very helpful to also get good insights into what is recommended by SAP. We do structure those along the SAP, the secure operations map. And here you see there we cover a lot of relevant topics along the life cycle, be it around the organization, like risk management, to data privacy and protection, to single sign-on, to security hardening, or network security. So all those different aspects that play a role in security. And I will also give you a short glimpse because that's much easier than showing that you on a slide. You see here you have different components. You have here priorities. Maybe you first want to look into all the critical ones. You can map it to, again, this security map to the different aspects there. Or you just say, okay, I have here my component, let's say sub, look what to take, sub build, maybe build work zone, yeah, why not? And you see, you get a lot of recommendations around, for example, identification, security hardening, like audit data, data privacy. And let me just open up that one here. And you see also when it was updated and yeah, get corresponding links to that. So that's pretty helpful. And nevertheless, to get you more insights, we have also a session around that end of June around security configuration for your SAP BTP services, where we do provide exactly an overview of those security recommendations for you to give you insights and best practices. Then we have the whole topic of identity and access management. So that's a crucial component of any IT architecture, right? So deeply integrated into the SAP landscape. And yeah, so from SAP BTP to private cloud environments. And here we do offer these SAP Cloud Identity Services. Here you see they consist of authentication, like authentication and federation of identities. We have provisioning of identities with identity lifecycle management and management of groups and roles. We have authorization management with authorization services and policy handling, and all built on and integrated through the identity directory, where you have a central user store and an API built on system for cross-domain identity management, which is a standard for automating the exchange of user identity information. And here's an example of an example landscape where you see how those different services can come into action and how you can benefit then from SAP Cloud Identity Services. You see here some of the benefits it brings, like fast adoption of SAP solutions. You can extend quicker with optimized connectors. You have reduced efforts for point-to-point connections, modular architecture, and so on, right? What you can really benefit from. And that's why we put that also into a separate session here around best practices, especially for identity and access management. So if you're interested into that, that's of course, highly recommend to learn more about it and yeah, to fully leverage the capabilities of the included services within your landscape. With that, we come to management of your application lifecycle, meaning, yeah, like especially, yeah, handling the lifecycle overall and observability and monitoring. I want to start with a brief sketch of our approach to enable your teams to benefit from a more agile approach. Not that this is day two operations, but it has, of course, touch points to it, because when you do foster such an approach, it will help you also later on to really operate your applications then on day two. So the idea is that we say, okay, yeah, you need some kind of automated pipeline. Here we have a continuous integration and delivery service provided by SAP BTP that brings typical pipeline templates for SAP use cases. It works here with a third-party Git-based repository because many of our customers already made a choice, so we rather have to be open to work with those. And that is then used by the developers with, for example, the Business Application Studio, meaning they push their changes into the Git repository, which then triggers the pipeline on the continuous integration delivery that performs automated test cases and provides feedback to the developer on the quality of the change. And that's one of the drivers of the agility. You come up with a change, get direct feedback on the quality, and that can be unit tests, that can also be compliance checks. So you can really foster what you want to do there. And yeah, that's one of the drivers of the agility. Nevertheless, as soon as you come up with a qualified release candidate, the pipeline could then trigger a transport in the SAP Cloud Transport Management Service, which allows you to centrally define a delivery landscape, who's allowed to perform changes on which node. You have also a central log file when it comes to performing changes on production for auditing reasons, for example. Oops, was this doing my camera? Sorry. Hope it's not my laptop. It's really the camera. I hope it's recovering somehow. I'm still there. No worries. Let me just try to fix that. Strange.
I can see you.
You can see me. Okay, good. Maybe it's just me. Okay. Yeah, it's moving a little bit. My camera seems to be a little bit.
That's true.
Funny.
You
Okay.
are a bit low. Yes.
Yeah, right.
And,
but I did not move or whatever. Anyhow, I'm still there. That's important message for you. No worries. And with that, you can also foster compliance, right? You say, okay, I have that automation on the left side, but with the release candidate, I really define what is required in terms of compliance to really be considered as a transport. And then I have also a separation of concerns. And that can then also be orchestrated by SAP Cloud ALM, for example, with change and deployment capabilities, especially if you want to synchronize changes from different environments. And Cloud ALM then also offers to monitor and operate your application. And for that, it does not only provide central monitoring capabilities, but it also brings, for example, works closely with different observability services from SAP BTP. Because it does offer that for the whole portfolio of SAP, not only for SAP BTP. And that's, of course, the strength where you really have a central approach for those kind of processes. For the development, yeah, we have the developer guide. Again, that's, of course, day one. That's not day two, but just to let you know, I mean, maybe it might also be interesting for you to see what the programming models do tell the developers here for SAP Cloud Application Programming Model or ABAP Cloud, for example. In terms of the delivery, I already outlined that, but I want to stress here again the hybrid aspects. So for on-prem and private cloud, we still have the change and transport system of the ABAP system. That's the change and transport system, or the enhanced change and transport system, CTS Plus, to handle also non-ABAP content. And now we have the Cloud Transport Management Service for the cloud changes, there with the option to work together with pipeline. And you can then orchestrate really changes from different environments in, for example, SAP Cloud ALM. The same can be done also with SAP Solution Manager, but of course, the way forward would be SAP Cloud ALM. Just think of a hybrid application where you have maybe your application running on BTP and that works together with an API running in your backend system that you have also to enable, and you want to handle those in a synchronized way across the whole landscape, right? Okay. So I want to give you a short glimpse on that as well, just to give you an impression very briefly. For that, I have here my continuous integration delivery pipeline. Very simple. I will really keep it very short, but just to give you an impression, you see you can store credentials, you can store repositories here. You just have to copy over the clone URL from your repository and then configure a webhook for GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab, or Azure repos. Webhook just means whenever you submit something to the Git repository, that it will then trigger the pipeline to run. And we will here, oops, sorry, wrong one. We will here just create a short shop for our demo. Let's just do that briefly. I will just make it a little bit bigger. So we just say, okay, Google demo, oops, Google demo. Here I will select the connected repository. I can specify the branch, and I could say, for example, I also use wildcards. So if you have several feature branches, they shall all trigger the single pipeline But here in my example, I just want to run it against the main branch because that shall be also a delivery pipeline. Here we see the pipeline templates, and in my example, I have here one for the Cloud Foundry, meaning if you have, for example, a CAP application. And here you see already that you have different frameworks. And the good thing is that this is really handled by SAP, meaning that's no longer an overhead for you to look for the latest updates, to look for security flaws or whatever. That is handled really by us centrally as a service, meaning whenever a new version comes up, we do add it here automatically, and you can just select it. Here, that's really for the build case. You could add here static show checks, lint checks, malware scans. You can have here execution of WebDriver O tests, triggers on a cube scans. You see it's some kind of opinionated path, but you could break out of that if you want to have other ones. And here in my simple pipeline, I just want to have a build, and then I want to perform a transport. And for that, I just specify the source node. I specify my credentials for my transport management service, and that's it. And now I can go to my sample repository. Here, for example, I have here my package JSON and will just perform a simple dummy update. Let me just do that. Dismiss. Just commit. Sorry. Didn't want to commit it. I wanted to go onto the package, of course. And I just change it. And you see in my dummy example, I just change here the version, committed change. I directly use here Google demo, committed directly to the main branch, as you can see here. And now we can go to the service, and hopefully it will coming up. As you see here, now it's starting to come up with the pipeline. It will take some minutes. What it does in the background is actually it does build up a Kubernetes environment, build up a pipeline there. It's really an isolated environment, and then it will perform the build and trigger the corresponding actions that you have defined, and afterwards also securely dismantle the environment. So you really have an isolated environment just for your use cases, which is also again key for security reasons, and it just makes things so much easier. I have here a similar pipeline that I've run before. Let me just guide you through. You see we have here the same activities, same pipeline here again with the dev node, here export from dev. And now I will briefly go to my cloud transport management service. Here I have defined different delivery landscapes. Let me just go here to the transport landscape that starts with the dev node. Sorry, I was also timed out here, of course. So here we are back on track. Let me just say it's a very simple demo landscape. You see here we have the entry node underscore dev. That's what I specified in my pipeline. And if I now go to the import queue of my QA node, you will see some of the changes that came up. Yesterday when I did the try run, here we had the corresponding change. I can check out what is comprised. I see, okay, I have here my demo application consisting of an app router and an UI. And now I could handle here the deployment into the QA node and then forward it to the production node and have that all stored here in the corresponding action logs, right? And here I have a Cloud ALM instance, just to give you the whole picture. Here we can have features where we say, okay, I define what I want to implement. That's under the implementation category. Sorry, it's also timed out, of course. I was a little bit too impatient again. That's always with those live demos. It's coming up, and here we see down here we have the features. So that's really the element where you define your changes, so to say. And let me just bring it up. I've created here already a feature before called, again, Google. Sorry, it's again a test system, not very responsive today. Just grant him some time. It's coming up. Where is it? Google demo. Okay, let's take that one here. And you see here I have a status. It's in implementation. I have here a description. I can assign user stories, project tasks, references. I can assign it to different projects, whatever I like. But what I want to show you here is that interdependency handling. So I can assign transports. And here I go, for example, to my list of available transports in this Cloud LM instance. I see here, for example, one transport coming from a backend system, O11, client 100. And here I have several, transports from different attached SAP Cloud Transport Management instances, meaning BTP changes. I can assign those. And with that, I define that interdependency between both. And now I could say, okay, those both together build a feature. I can now change the status, or you first have to save and close, and then trigger the deployment into both environments, both the backend system and the business technology platform. Here I can change the status to hand over to test and so on, and then go on. I think you got the idea, but that's the easy way to really handle those interdependencies, and it's pretty straightforward to do that. And if you have defined the right landscape or approach from the beginning for your development teams, right? Okay, so we have delivered the application towards the production environment. Now it's about your problem detection and resolution. And here I already mentioned, I mean, we have the different use cases on the business technology platform. They expose telemetry data, and that is then coming up in a central observability for problem detection. There we have SAP Cloud ALM or Focused Run. Maybe focus on SAP Cloud ALM today, where you see, okay, what is really happening in my end-to-end landscape? And the good thing is also for hybrid scenarios, you would also see, okay, how does it look like? For example, there's a user monitoring where I see exactly what was done. I see if there's a performance degradation, and I can dig into which module the problem is, and then move over to a local observability to perform a root cause analysis and to know, yeah, which tool to involve, and then let them investigate and then fix the issue. And for that, Cloud LM does bring different capabilities. Let me just bring it up here. You see we have here the inbound integration. Here, events, logs, traces come in. They then show up in all kind of monitoring capabilities, like exception monitoring, real and synthetic user monitoring, via health monitoring, and via an intelligent event processing that can then perform to like central alert management, notification management, or trigger ops automation. That's the whole concept. And of course, we want to dig into that also further. So we have a session right next week for SAP Cloud LM for SAP Business Technology Platform, focusing really on what it brings for the business technology platform. So introducing how to monitor SAP BTP, gain insights on observability, get familiar also with the concept to have those telemetry data. We use their open telemetry, which is an open standard, to expose the telemetry data, so you can learn about SAP's vision for RISE operations and clean dashboards as well. That's of course separate to the operations part, but if you're interested in a RISE deal, you can also get more insights about how we support you for that implementation and also clean core side, right, which is also crucial aspects around SAP Business Technology Platform. Then we have a very related topic. That's the local observability part, so to say, with the SAP Cloud Logging Service. That service collects logs, metrics, and traces for your applications. And with that, developers can just use it to analyze their BTP workloads. It's actually the successor of the application logging service, which is deprecated. You can still use it in the terms of your current contracts, but the way forward is the cloud logging service, because that does offer, first of all, support for different runtimes like Cloud Foundry and Kyma. It does use open telemetry, which makes it a little bit easier. And it also does offer more capabilities, like, for example, an alerting, a feature requested for a very long time for application logging. And now with cloud logging, we were able to provide it so that you get really alerted in terms something should come up. And here, end of March, we have a session around observing your SAP BTP applications at depth with SAP Cloud Logging. there the experts will show the possible instrumentation options, so you know exactly what to do, that the data of your custom app will show up in the corresponding logging service, and how you can then deep dive on the rich analytical and alerting capabilities of SAP Cloud Logging as a service to really come up with the root cause of potential issues. And just to stress it again, I mean, in SAP Cloud LM, here an example with the real user monitoring, you see we have a call tree where we see, okay, a user came in using here an UI5 component, then accessing an HTTP request with all the details around the backend and which browser version is used, and accessing a database. You will see exactly, okay, which parts are really involved in the end-to-end scenario, what are horizontal trays, and we say, okay, here's an issue now with a component running on BTP. So I can, out of the context, really switch then and jump to SAP Cloud Logging to then perform a vertical trace for that component. And that's really the very tight interplay we have between central and local observability. You can then also see in the session accordingly. Another aspect, like mentioned before, I mean, we already said, okay, BTP comes up with events that then show up in some kind of form of monitoring, most probably health monitoring, and then it's traced to operations automation, which could then trigger an operation flow. And for this operation flow, we have also different options. It could trigger down there, for example, a workflow on SAP Build Process Automation, but it could also trigger then, for example, remediation action on the SAP Automation Pilot Service that we have seen before. And here we have also a session on beginning of April for SAP BTP Ops Automation with SAP Cloud LM, where you can learn about how to enhance operational efficiency with this central ops automation across a complete landscape, meaning where BTP might only be a part of it. And it works then closely with BTP tools. You will also see how it works, for example, then again with Automation Pilot Service to ensure proactive issue resolution and really to minimize manual errors and support an end-to-end workflow. With that, we've already reached the end, but I want to nevertheless use the opportunity to again outline the different topics we have along the life cycle. And when I talk about life cycle, you know, I'm coming from the DevOps environment. I always think about planning, coding, building, testing, and then releasing, deploying, operating, and the feedback in the sense of DevOps. But that's also generically speaking, of course. And when you now think of our offerings, you see we have the triggering of the delivery with SAP Cloud LM and SAP Cloud Transport Management Service, also handling the deployment. We have the operations part with monitoring, observability there with Cloud LM together with SAP Cloud Logging Service and SAP Automation Pilot Service. You should use the retrospective to identify candidates for further automation. That's really something you should do as best practice. You could also, for the dev part, although we focus today on ops part, but also on the dev part, you should think about how you can influence the tool chain of your developers and the processes really for an agile lifecycle and with the right level of control, meaning that you really take influence and make sure that the environment that is used by the development teams also can then later on be easier operated, right? And we have, for example, Terraform, where you can then automate the onboarding of new teams. You could also think about making Terraform part of your pipeline if you want to automatically provision and decommission temporary test systems or environments, right? When it comes to technical ops automation, I would really say that's a holistic picture where you should really look into all those phases and think about what do I do manually there? Is that a candidate which I could maybe automate and reduce my technical overhead? For high availability and disaster recovery, that's also a topic covering several of the phases of the life cycle where you should plan reliable infrastructures. Coding should also reflect that replication is considered. That should then also be tested and accordingly deployed and operated. Also in terms of trying out a switch over to a failback infrastructure, for example. And security, non-surprisingly, is also a loose stick topic you should really tackle along the complete life cycle. So here again, the full list. So I hope you got an insights on what to expect and what to choose in the upcoming weeks. I also want to take the opportunity to thank again Tanya, of course, for hosting and organizing the whole series. Really appreciate it. And of course, all the experts that are part of the series. You see the pictures down there, and which you can then meet in person in the upcoming weeks. Because it's really a great opportunity to really work with those experts for the single topics then, and to learn more about it, how you can improve your day two operations and processes and make sure that you are providing reliable, secure applications on BTP with a reduced cognitive load for your teams and your development teams, so that development can focus on providing more business value on the platform. With that, yeah, just in time, Tanya, are there any questions?
Actually, yes, we do have a couple of questions. Perhaps you can answer them very quickly, and if the answer is too long, we can post it in the chat area.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So the first question is, well, thank you first of all for your awesome overview. I think that was amazing. I don't think you can get anything like that anywhere. So thank you.
Still struggling with the camera, but I'm still there. Yeah.
Yeah, the camera, and there's a delay between what you talk and what the camera shows. I
don't know.
But
my
okay,
laptop is not up to par. But yeah, let's go to the questions. Thanks, Tanya.
So what is the best practice around directories and sub-accounts? The recommendations seem very general and sometimes contradictory.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So we are right now in the process to really update the recommendations we do provide in the SAP BTP Administrator's Guide. So we plan to have a more generic approach in the beginning, but realized, okay, that does not fit many of the cases. So we will come up with much more guidance around different aspects so that they can really come up with the individual best approach for account structuring. So look out for updates coming in the upcoming weeks. I just took a look at the internal draft today, and we plan to come up with that soon.
Great, thank you. Now, the next, for automation purpose, one often needs a technical platform user. These users typically have to be quite powerful users, for instance, space developers or sub-account admins.
Right. I mean, that's of course always a challenging situation where you want to see, okay, how you do that. I mean, in the automation pilot service, we handle that we can store the different permissions also in a secure way, so that we can decouple it a little bit, making sure that yeah, we only use the what is needed approach. But yeah, it's normally a challenging way. I agree. Also in terms of who has access then to which landscape to perform those changes. So there's certain best practices as part of the setup of the service. But yeah, if you are lacking something, please reach out to me via email anytime.
Thank you. Now, the next one is, do you have security best practices for technical users? For instance, recommendations on authentication methods or access restriction, risk-based authentication, etc.?
Yes, sorry for interrupting, Tanya. Yeah, sure. I mean, that should be part of our best practice that I briefly showed, but I would, of course, recommend you to really make best use of the upcoming sessions there as well, because we will especially look into exactly those topics where we will share best practices and security recommendations for those aspects. Yeah.
Okay, and then goes into Cloud TMS requires a space developer that has to authenticate with basic authentication password. If credentials get lost, this user can delete services, read modified data.
All right. I mean, we are aware of that's still an open topic, but we also want to come up with other methods. We are there aligning also with the continuous integration delivery service together to come up with a different concept, and also to allow other authentication methods. That's also planned, or we are working on concepts in that direction.
Okay, great. Thank you. Then FinOps question. Given that the BTP resource consumption monitor app requires deploying additional services, which paradoxically increases costs, are there any plans to integrate this functionality directly into SAP BTP as a standard feature to eliminate these extra expenses?
So sorry, which was I missed the first part.
given that the BTP resource consumption monitor deploying additional services, which paradoxically increases costs.
Yeah, got it. Yeah. To be honest, there I cannot give you a reply right now. My demand to you would be if you can also drop me a line and we can make the connection there to our FinOps experts and discuss that with the colleagues, if that would be fine for you.
And I also included, maybe you can ask the question on March 13, as there will be a FinOps webinar. I added the link in the chat.
Excellent. Thanks, Tanya.
Last question. Is there a guideline to already implement the best day two practice when facing the S4 transformation?
I mean, S4 transformation, of course, is now a huge topic. I mean, we have many touch points in that regards as well. But I cannot give you now a short answer to that as well, and would also have to involve my colleagues here. Sorry, same request to reach out, and I can make the connection.
There is, I will put it in the comments area because I don't have it here ready. There is also a big transformation series that a colleague of mine is doing. So you might be interested in that, but I will post the link to that series in the comments area after the session.
Thanks, Tanya. That's appreciated.
Absolutely happy. So once again, thank you so much for your awesome presentation. It was really great. And other attendees are confirming that. And of course, a big thank you to all attendees for joining. And I hope to see you again next week.
Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining. Really appreciate that you took the time. See you soon. Bye.
Have a great day, a great evening, depending on where you are. Bye-bye.